What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Luke Gibbons.
And this is Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
And you are listening to Colonized Minds, the podcast. We have some very, very special guests with us in the center today. If you could introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Salvador Garcia Lopez.
I am Alexis Bright.
And I'm Crystal Chong.
So, you guys have been hired as our new group of equity and diversity advocates for this year. For those folks who may not be familiar with that program, if you could maybe explain a little bit about what the Equity and Diversity Advocate Program is.
Yeah, so the Equity and Diversity Program, so basically as advocates, we're here to advocate on behalf of students and really create an equitable experience for them here at campus. I like the word equity. It stands out because so much we hear about equality. Each student needs something differently, and addressing that is what creates equity, rather than just giving everyone the same thing and saying, oh, this is equality, like everyone has the same opportunities. It's different.
And so what are some of the things that you all do as equity and diversity advocates for folks who may not be familiar with the program?
At the Multicultural Center here, we plan events and workshops on campus, and we also have resources here at the Multicultural Center for students to come in and utilize them.
Okay. Like what types of resources?
Currently, we are working on a scholarship book that has many kinds of scholarships for many students that identify as many different identities. And it's a way for us to help students fund their education.
Nice. Any other resources you want to kind of make folks aware of?
Yeah, we have some other things. We have snacks here. We have printing services. We offer tutoring here for students, or just a quiet place where they can come work, use the computers.
Anything else you guys want to add?
Like Alexis and Salvador said, we're here to help the campus be more equitable, and the difference between equality and equity is really important. The schools weren't always built for everybody, and we're here just to make sure that everyone's voice gets put back into the mix.
So what drew you all to this position?
I think for me, this position naturally is kind of like in my realm. The reason why I'm back in school has a lot to do with rediscovering myself and my identity and taking power over that. And that has a lot to do with being interested in social justice, but it also has a lot to do with getting specific training on it, something that until, being 30, I haven't received in my education.
For me, it's a way for me to represent students on a larger scale rather than just representing them around campus. It's for me to represent them on a college-wide level, but also to provide students with the needs that they need to succeed.
What about you, Alexis?
Last year I spent a lot of time in the Multicultural Center and not working here. Just kind of like spending time using the different resources here. And I had a difficult time my first year in college, and by being here and having a mentor and the different resources that were available to me, I really felt grounded in my academic experience. And one thing I really appreciated is the different things y'all were talking about last year, the different events. A lot of it were things that I was never exposed to, so it was uncomfortable in learning that, but I also felt empowered. And in feeling empowered as a student, it kind of like spewed into every facet of my life. So overall, it was just a really good experience for me.
So can you tell us about one of those events or things that you attended last year that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the most striking event for me was the wall. It was downstairs in front of this building, and I think the reason that stood out to me is because it was so blatant and out there, and it's like you can talk about these things and kind of talk about it for a moment and then it's done. You never talk about it again, revisit it. But it was right there. It was every time I came in this building, it was right there, and just reading it and gaining an understanding and the conversations that spewed afterwards.
Right.
It was exciting. It was uncomfortable, but it was exciting overall.
So what was the wall?
Yeah, so the wall in front of the building was a representation of the wall that many immigrants crossed going from Mexico to America. There were personal stories on there, just kind of reading about the trials and the things they've had to overcome.
So y'all have answered why specifically the Equity and Diversity Advocates Program, but I'm interested to know, when was your first encounter with MC?
My first encounter was last year, I want to say November. So November of last year, I had volunteered to be an MLK Day project leader. And then after that, I just kind of stayed in here throughout the year.
Although we emailed before that.
Yeah. The summer before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were trying to get Alexis to come in here last year as an Equity and Diversity Advocate.
But she didn't want to work with us.
No. It's okay, we still reeled her in.
Yes. Persistence is the key. And what about you, Crystal? What was your first interaction with the Multicultural Center?
I think it was around the Whiteness History Month events. I was really impressed that someone would take such a risk to say something so important. What Alexis said earlier struck my mind about, well, not exactly, but the struggles that we face in our generation are more invisible than they were. The kinds of things that generations before us struggled with were very obvious. Like, you could turn on the news and see outright violence happening between people, and now the violence is kind of invisible, and we don't really see the ways that it expresses itself. So as advocates, it's like we try to just like shine a light, like almost as if we're a black light, shining light on things that you can't really see without a little bit of help.
Right.
And Whiteness History Month for me was doing that exact thing. Part of the reason why we exist as equity and inclusion, or people who are interested in equity and inclusion, is because originally everyone wasn't included. So I think it was really, really important.
What about you, Salvador?
For me, it was the deportation wall, or just the wall. During fall term of 2015, I believe, it was there. So as I was coming up here to have lunch, I saw it there. And when I saw that, I just instantly remembered the stories that my relatives have told me about when they crossed the border and their experience. So for me to see the numbers on coffins of the people that have been found dead there and their stories, it was very real. Like, knowing that I do have relatives that have gone through that experience.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask, and there was something in what Alexis said that made me think about it, was the idea of being uncomfortable. Y'all have gone through like a lot of training so far this term. Alexis is smiling and nodding as I say that. Since you started working here, what would you say is probably the most uncomfortable moment that you've had?
Honestly, I felt uncomfortable throughout all our training. Watching the videos and kind of realizing the different systems of oppression, like how they're built into the system that still perpetuates and like affects us all. I think that idea overall is like overwhelming, trying to think like, how do we dismantle that? It's so huge. It's like all, like we grow up knowing this. It's all we know, kind of. So one article that stood out to me during our social justice training was one saying that a black woman would have to work 66 years to earn what a white man earns in 40 years. So I think why that like really resonated with me is because I felt like it was exposing like huge inequity in our society. And personally, as a black woman, I was kind of like, oh my goodness, I've always had like this mindset of like I have to be twice as good to be considered like as good. I think reading that article, I just kind of like that belief that I didn't really want to accept was like reaffirmed in that article.
For me, it would have to be, I don't know if it was Gender Day or Sex Day, what we do about like the background of how women were treated throughout the ages, throughout the past, since the beginning basically, and how they've been always considered as subhuman in a way.
It's property.
So that was very interesting, and just learning about the beauty standards that women have to go through. And they're insane. I saw a video of how you have to be considered beautiful. That's basically not real. So it's a beauty standard that isn't really achievable.
Right. And so I know which video you're talking about. You're talking about the video where they take the picture of the model, right? And then they go into Photoshop to make her neck longer, to make her legs longer, to make her skinnier. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes, that one. And also the beauty standards through the
ages.
Yeah.
Something that stood out to me was The Sound of Wealth, the video where it just showed sonically like what the monetary difference is between the 1% and the rest. So basically it sounded like change on a dollar that we all have to share. And then for the 1%, it was like just a cascade like of like coins. And it went on and on and on. And I was like, is this going to stop? And it just made me like aware in a way that it wasn't in words. It was just, it affected me greatly. I don't know if it's because like I play music, so like just the length of sound really cemented in my head what the difference was.
What would you say is probably the biggest surprise that you've experienced since working here?
I didn't know that we were going to do social justice, really. I'll be honest.
What were you signing up for, Salvador?
I thought it was a multicultural center that just worked on events about other cultures, basically. I was like, oh, social justice is probably just like the little side thing that you talk about, and then we focus on events.
Like, oh no, this is all they do.
Yeah. So it was a major shock.
So that's interesting in and of itself because we've talked about it in past podcasts about like the interpretation that folks might have of a multicultural center, and oftentimes that is the interpretation.
So when we were talking in the retreat about how what we are not and how we don't just get cultures and get little tidbits of them to show them off to the school, I was like, that's what I thought the center was.
That's kind of what I wanted to do.
So now that you have the realization of what we actually do, what do you think? You're like, oh gosh, this is daunting, or?
At first it was very mentally draining. There was a lot of knowledge to take in, but now it's interesting how knowledge is power and I can go out and do things here in the center.
What about for you two? What would you say is probably the most surprising thing that you've experienced since working here?
Honestly, I feel like the most surprising thing, this is not my first job. It's very different at my other job, and I just feel so supported here as a student. In the beginning of term, Elizabeth asked for all of our syllabi, and I was like, I didn't understand why initially she was asking for it. And she was basically saying, I want to have this so I can see what's going on in your classes, so I'm not giving too much work during a time that you have a big project or a midterm coming up. And to me, like, I felt great. I was revitalized. I just really felt supported. Would recommend all students to work here and take this opportunity.
What about you, Crystal? What would you say is probably the most surprising thing since?
The most surprising thing, I don't know, how much I realized that, like, you never stop growing. And, like, I think I realized that, like, once every 5 to 10 years, like I hit a plateau of thinking, oh, I've got things on lock, I've really got things going for me. And then bam, it's like I feel like a teenager again, like rediscovering the entire world. And I think that's got to be a trend for the rest of my life, I hope.
That just reminded me of, it's like imposter syndrome.
Say more.
So imposter syndrome. So every time that I go into a new setting, like starting grad school or like starting a new job or even going into a new council or committee or board, right? Even if it's people that I already know and that I already work with and that I know that I should be there, there's always this sense of, oh shoot, like, should I really be here? And so it's this sense of like imposter syndrome, like, oh gosh, they're going to figure out that I'm not supposed to be here, right? It's more of an insecurity than anything else, and it never really goes away. At least that's been the experience in my life. You just kind of have to like trek through it, like deal with the uncomfortableness.
So let me ask, what do you think is probably the biggest issue facing students right now?
The cost and the risk. The cost is that it costs a lot to go to college, both financially, emotionally, mentally. It takes a lot out of a person to commit to this because the risk of exiting college with debt and not having any jobs available for you is very, very high. For a lot of my friends, they have bachelor's degrees or even some graduate degrees, and they're working in service industry or retail still. And it's because the jobs that they wanted or the jobs that they're suited for aren't available. Can't tell you how many graphic designers or musicians or mathematicians I even know who are working, jobs that are not in their field. I think another issue facing students is old policies that are still in practice, even some that don't have anything to do with the school. So let me just go right out here and say, like, this summer I applied for food stamps because different reasons, but I wanted to supplement my income. But I didn't qualify because at the time I was only working about 15 to 20 hours. And I was working here at the MC, but not really getting paid yet and not really showing like any paychecks. So I was working 20 plus hours altogether, but my paychecks only showed one job working about 15 hours a week. And so I didn't qualify because I'm a student. So if you're a student, you don't qualify for SNAP unless you also work 20 plus hours a week, which is really hard to do if you're going to school full-time. And one of my caseworkers at the DHS said that they hate denying benefits to a student for this reason, because there's an old rule still in policy that says if you're a student, you have to work 20 plus hours a week. And they put in that rule to stop student protesters from having time to protest during the 1960s. This is what the DHS worker told me.
Interesting.
Is that this ancient rule exists it was a political ploy to keep students from voicing up their opinions if they wanted federal money.
That's interesting because when I and maybe it's changed since I finished undergrad, because when I was an undergrad I did SNAP, but the only requirement for me to get it was to qualify for federal work study, and then I did work study, but I wouldn't work like a ton of hours. I worked like 8 hours a week on campus.
So that's the other thing. You can also get work study on campus, and that qualifies you, but not everyone either qualifies or has access to it.
Right.
Like those jobs are limited.
Like I, for one, in my undergrad, did not qualify for work study.
Oh, really?
But so and so that, I think, is when you talk about kind of archaic policies. I think even in how we look at who qualifies for work study and how we qualify for aid. So, for instance, came from a 2-parent household. My parents didn't necessarily make a lot of money, but they made too much for me really to get any substantial aid other than loans, because what they're doing is they're calculating your EFC, which is your estimated family contribution. Right. The catch to that is my family wasn't necessarily contributing financially. So the money that they were making, they were living off of. They couldn't necessarily give me money to, to help supplement my education. So here it is, we're calculating this EFC, but we're not necessarily taking into consideration that some of our students may not actually be able to get contributions from their family to help support them while they're in school. And so, like, even that, how we calculate how people are eligible for aid, I think is a bit archaic and needs some revamping.
No, I totally understand what you mean, because my financial aid package was also based off that, right?
Yeah.
And according to it, my parents were to contribute like between $3,000 and $6,000 each year. Yeah, I never saw a single dollar of that $3,000 and $6,000, and it was because like they literally by like a couple hundred had passed the limits, right? And so what my parents ended up doing like years, like after that first year, was they would take like a week off work, because it wasn't that 1 week off work essentially put them at that level where my financial aid could be like drastically increased. Yeah. And I could actually get that access. But again, not everyone has that, like even that possibility of taking a week off work.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me it like cements it right in, like how the struggle for civil rights, the struggle for equity and equality and justice has never ended. We still have these rules that keep students from reclaiming their power.
What is the one thing that you wish PCC knew about your experience as a student?
That taking a placement test that was going to hold me back 1 year in math could potentially hold me back for a term or two after the estimated time for graduation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. I've experienced the same thing. One thing I wish PCC knew about my experience as a student is that being involved on campus has really like shaped my overall experience. I moved to Portland my senior year of high school, and it was just me. I didn't have anyone to check in with and kind of have that support, and I've had a completely different experience there, which was 2015, that I'm having here in 2016.
This kind of job is very stressful, but it is very entertaining. A lot of internal happiness. Like after I get something done here, I go home feeling proud of myself of what I've done today here at the Multicultural Center, knowing that it is going to make a difference for someone else who might affect their education. So I could be the difference of someone staying in school for another term or dropping out, and knowing that I am a part of that is something that keeps me going, keeps me coming here.
Anything else y'all want to add?
Come to the MC. Seriously.
Free coffee, free snacks.
Seriously, come to the MC.
All right, do we have any announcements for today?
So one announcement I'll make, if you hadn't had the chance to already, our Hispanic Latino Heritage Month banners are currently up in the Student Services Building, SSB, on the first floor. If you hadn't got a chance yet, I definitely would encourage you to check those out. They're part of a long series that we're doing to shed a light on folks who made a significant contribution to really American history, but don't really get a lot of shine. So we're doing ones for Hispanic Latino Heritage Months. We've also done them for Asian American Pacific Islander Month and Native American Heritage Month, which will be coming up in a few weeks. So we'll be having those around campus as well.
Another announcement that I want to add is that it's time to restock our snack supply. So what are your favorite snacks? Hit us up on Instagram with a picture of you eating it or a picture of it at PCC Cascade MC. Or tell us on Twitter at Cascade_MC.
Some of the other resources I think it's important to let people know about is our library. We have a lot of really, really great books here, whether it's the new Jim Crow, autobiography of Malcolm X, Black Like Me, Yell, Oh, Girl. A lot of really, really great books. And so I would encourage folks, if you are in between classes, just want to take a load off, definitely come in here and check out the library. We also, in addition to having snacks for students, we give out free meal vouchers. So if you're on campus, you don't have any money, you can come here. We can give you a meal voucher so that you can get something to eat downstairs. And we also give out bus vouchers or free bus passes. We give out up to 2 per term. So if you're stranded on campus, don't have a way to get home or have a way to get to work, you can come and get a bus pass from the Multicultural Center. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out as far as other types of resources that we offer students.
All right, so this has been Colonized Minds, the podcast. This is Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
This is Luke Gibbons.
Saying, so what if it's true?